Have you ever found yourself scrolling through headlines, about some global crisis, and something just feels maybe incomplete?
Yeah, like you're not getting the whole picture.
Exactly. Or even that the perspective feels a bit skewed, and you're left wondering, what's it really like for the people living through it?
hmm That disconnect is pretty common, I think.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. We're looking critically at the international media's coverage of the Sri Lankan protests, the ones demanding the Rajapaksa family leave office.
Right?
Our mission really is to unpack how certain narratives get built, maybe what gets missed, and importantly, why that matters for how we understand these huge global moments.
And for this deep dive, we're drawing on a really insightful opinion piece from Al Jazeera. It's called Sri Lanka's Picturesque Protests, and the author is Neelika Jayawardane.
A powerful critique, definitely.
Yeah.
So just to set the scene a bit, let's rewind quickly to March last year. Sri Lanka's economic crisis was hitting hard,
Really hitting a boiling point.
and people started gathering, protesting outside the homes of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa.
They were protesting endemic corruption, nepotism, mismanagement, the whole package, really.
It grew fast. This protest movement led to a big encampment right there on Galley-Face Beach. It got nicknamed Gota Gogama.
Which basically means go village, or the village demanding Gotabaya Rajapaksa resign.
And it wasn't small scale. It got huge support from student unions, trade unions all across the island.
A really widespread movement.
Okay, so let's dive into the core of it. The author starts with this observation, maybe a familiar one, about crises in the global south. They say Western news outlets often just parachute in correspondents, photographers maybe, who have little to no in-depth knowledge of the crisis, culture, and locality. What's your take on that initial claim?
Well, it immediately flags a critical problem. When you drop journalists into really complex situations without that deep local understanding, the result often isn't, comprehensive reporting. Instead, the focus can shift pretty quickly to getting those spectacular images.
The dramatic shots.
Exactly. Or delivering the hottest takes. Basically stuff that gets eyeballs, maximizes airtime, or fills column inches.
So spectacle over substance, maybe?
Pretty much. And it creates this real gap between what gets reported internationally and what people on the ground are actually experiencing.
And the author makes it clear this isn't just a general theory, right? They argue this pattern played out specifically with the Sri Lanka coverage.
Yes, very specifically.
So one of the first big misrepresentations the piece points out is how the protests themselves were framed. Initially, people at Gota Gogama, they were called protesters. Simple enough.
Standard term.
But then the police and military move in. We're talking tear gas, water cannons, even reports of live bullets being used against them.
A serious escalation.
And suddenly, the word popping up in news reports is clashes. What's the problem with using clashes there?
It's hugely problematic. Because the article points out, the Rajapaksa family reportedly bussed in their own supporters.
Right, I remember reading that.
Described as, destitute people paid a few thousand rupees in bottles of Iraq, local alcohol. And their specific purpose was to attack the protesters, to destroy the Gota Gogama site.
So it wasn't a clash between two equal sides, it was an attack.
Exactly. It was a one-sided attack, seemingly state-backed, framed by many international outlets as this kind of mutual combat, a clash.
And it wasn't just clashes, was it? Other words started appearing too, like mobs and rioters.
Yeah, those terms started getting thrown around alongside clashes.
How do those words distort things even further for someone reading about this from afar?
Well, mobs, rioters, they carry this immediate sense of illegitimacy, of chaos, of unruliness.
Right, not legitimate protests.
Precisely. There's a mention of Delini Algama, a PhD student, who saw German news using Unruhen, which means riots. And as she points out, framing it as a clash between two groups does something really damaging. It delegitimizes the protests.
It puts them on the same moral level.
Exactly. It equates people who are just practicing their democratic right to protest with the violence of groups that were, well, sent by the state to shut them down.
Wow.
The author even draws a parallel, a powerful one, to how protests in Palestine are often covered internationally, that same language of clashes obscuring the power imbalance.
That's a really stark comparison. So the language itself is a major issue. But the author goes deeper, right, into the visual framing.
Yes, the visual side too, this idea of the Orientalist picturesque.
Explain that a bit. How does Sri Lanka's history factor in?
Well, the argument is that Sri Lanka's colonial past, combined with its modern image, is a popular European holiday spot.
Beaches, tea plantations.
Right, that sort of thing. It apparently led to these problematic attitudes where the complex reality of the protests got reduced to, well, one-dimensional Orientalist fantasies.
Okay, fantasies. But let's contrast that with the reality the author describes inside the protest movement. It sounds like it was anything but a fantasy. It was idealistic, sure, but also grounded in collective care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Goda Gogama wasn't just a campsite. It was like a mini society built on mutual support. They set up a free food station,
Amazing.
a medical aid tent. They even had a library running people's university sessions.
A library at a protest camp.
Yeah, people were actively, consciously, strategically educating each other.
Yeah.
Not just about the immediate economic crisis, but digging into the history, how leaders used ethno-nationalism to divide communities for decades.
So a real grassroots political education effort happening right there.
Definitely.
And the goal wasn't just economic change, but unity. Bridging these deep divides, ethnic, religious, class, that have plagued Sri Lanka since independence.
That was central. It was about trying to heal those rifts. And they did it with incredible creativity.
Like what kind of things were they doing?
Oh, all sorts. Educational shadow puppet shows. Or Caucasus Island Bala. These are catchy, often satirical Sri Lankan songs. They had really inventive slogans, hilarious protest posters, a lot of humor mixed with serious purpose.
And the interfaith aspect you mentioned sounds really powerful.
It really was. You had people from different backgrounds, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu groups, often set against each other, now breaking fast together during Ramadan, celebrating Easter together, observing the Buddhist festival Vesak together. It was visually and symbolically potent. There was even a Katadia, a traditional exorcist, doing a ceremony to, cast out the evil affecting the island.
That's incredible. A real mixing of traditions towards a common goal.
And it wasn't just symbolic. This shared space led to crucial conversations. People educating each other about past state violence, particularly against Muslim and Tamil communities.
Acknowledging difficult truths.
Yeah, and recognizing why, for instance, Tamils in the north and east couldn't protest as freely because of the risk of state surveillance and crackdown. They specifically honored Tamil victims of the Civil War, invited families of the forcibly disappeared to share their stories.
Building solidarity through shared grief and understanding of state violence.
Yes, and religious organizations themselves played this really interesting, vital role.
How so?
You had representatives, Catholic nuns, priests, imams, Hindu priests, Buddhist monks, actually attending the protests.
Not just endorsing, but being physically present.
Present as impartial witnesses, the author says, and also as sources of protection. They formed human chains at times, sat together, held overnight vigils. The images must have been incredibly powerful.
Really meaningful images, yeah.
But then, how does some of the international media portray all this, these strategic efforts, this deep meaning? According to the author, it often gets flattened, reduced to useful naivete.
Infantilizing them almost.
Exactly. Making the movement seem less serious, less politically impactful than maybe, say, protests in the West might be portrayed.
So that Orientalist, picturesque idea comes back in.
It does. And when you mentioned Orientalism, it made me think of Edward Steed's work, too. The author seems to implicitly draw on that framework.
How does Steed's idea of the two sides of the Orientalist image bank fit here? The savage other versus the picturesque other.
Well, that framework helps explain both sides of the problematic coverage, doesn't it? On one hand, when the state cracks down, the protesters can suddenly be framed as the savage other mobs, rioters, justifying the violent settlement, as Steed might put it.
Okay, I see that.
And on the other hand, the idealism, the interfaith unity, the cultural expressions, the religious figures, they can all be packaged as the picturesque other.
Aesthetically pleasing, maybe exotic?
But ultimately passive, devoid of real political agency, just part of the scenery, to be instrumentalized, as Steed argued. It fits them neatly into a pre-existing simplistic narrative.
And there was that specific anecdote, right, about the BBC.
Yeah, quite telling. A representative from BBC Radio 4 Sunday contacted the author, specifically asking for religious protesters.
Like they already had the story angle figured out.
It suggests a preconceived notion, doesn't it? Looking for that specific picturesque element.
And the author had to correct them.
Yes. Stress that there weren't really religious protesters as such. These were representatives acting as witnesses, protectors. It wasn't some simple kumbaya moment.
Right. The reality was more complex.
Much more complex.
Right.
And it's crucial to add this nuance the author includes. Not all religious figures were supportive. Some Buddhist monks actively tried to dissuade people from protesting, even pushing ethno-nationalist ideas.
So internal divisions, too.
Yes, and even the Vesak celebrations, while showing unity for many, sometimes became, in the author's words, an ostentatious display of Buddhist hegemony. It wasn't pure, simple harmony. It was real, messy, contested.
That complexity is exactly what gets lost in the simplified narratives. Okay, so moving beyond the media critique, let's talk about the actual stakes here. The author paints a pretty grim picture of the reality on the ground in Sri Lanka at the time.
Yeah, it's stark. Thousands potentially dying because they couldn't get essential medicines. 1 million people described as already malnourished and near destitution.
I mean, there is absolutely nothing picturesque about that situation.
Nothing at all. It's life and death.
And this is where the media coverage becomes so critical, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because, like it or not, the loudest bullhorn for global attention often still belongs to major Western media outlets.
Their reach is huge.
And so, accurate, nuanced reporting is crucial. It's vital for Sri Lankans who need that global community support, that understanding, that pressure maybe. Misrepresentation actively undermines that.
But there's another side to this information war, isn't there? Sri Lankans themselves fighting back online.
Yes, that's a really important point the author makes. People on the ground are actively, collectively reporting, organizing, challenging each other, and denouncing disinformation, especially on platforms like Twitter.
Like a crowdsourced correction.
Exactly. It's this powerful form of correction showing incredible resilience. These are people who, as the author says, withstood monsoon rains, water cannons, tear gas, and government-sponsored thugs.
They endured so much.
And yet they continue to speak their truth and repeat their demands for change. This collective self-reporting, it's not just sharing news, it's about reclaiming their own story, asserting their agency against how others might portray them.
It really shows how the information landscape is changing, maybe. Local voices finding ways to be heard directly.
It's definitely a dynamic space now. The truth is contested, and people are finding tools to push back against dominant narratives.
So, wrapping this up, what does all this mean for you listening, for someone just trying to make sense of the world through the news?
Well, we've really unpacked how much the shaping of a story matters, haven't we? Especially for complex events happening far away.
Yeah, how the language used, the images chosen, the underlying biases.
Yeah.
It all constructs a particular reality.
We saw how language like clashes can obscure violence, how cultural biases, that whole Orientalist picturesque idea, can completely color perception.
It really drives home the need for critical consumption, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This deep dive is a strong reminder, I think. What we see, what we read in the news, it isn't always the full story. Often it can't be. But sometimes it's actively misleading.
So maybe the takeaway for you as you go about your day, scrolling through feeds or watching reports, especially about places or events you don't have direct experience with, just pause.
Yeah, take a second.
Ask yourself, what might be the underlying framework here? What assumptions could be shaping this report? Am I maybe just passively accepting a picturesque image because it's easy or exotic?
Or accepting a clash narrative at face value without asking who has the power, who initiated the violence.
Yeah. What's the real, maybe messy, unvarnished story behind the neat headline? And crucially, what important details, what human realities might be getting lost simply because of how that story is being told? Something to think about.